I can.
Do we know who's going to be doing it?
Do you guys know who's going to be
Leading it?
leading the start video?
Oh, I'll be doing it.
You'll be doing it? Okay.
Who's that?
What's your name? So just keep swapping here. Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
I'm in the Barco lounge, sure.
Yeah.
Was Pete on? Start video. USB cam. This is the audio, the USB.
That's the face I recognize. Who's
Yeah,
that?
that's Pete.
That's Pete Burgess?
Yeah.
All right, so it looks like he's going to, I'll comment on him. Pete Burgess is going to have
Okay.
a member of
Yep.
Troop 39. Pete, if you'd like to introduce the young man.
All right.
You might want to just open the meeting first, then.
No, I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Okay. I'll turn up my audio as well.
Okay, so we're ready?
I think so. We're ready.
Good evening, everyone. You are now attending the Town of Halifax Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. We are being recorded by Area 58 Community Access Television for viewing at a later date. Typically, you can find that on Channel 15 in your Comcast selection. And we're also live on YouTube if you are in fact inclined to want to watch us. We're going to depart a little bit from our usual opening. We had a request, and I think it's a tremendously good idea, from Troop 39, Boy Scouts of America in Halifax. I believe Pete Burgess is going to introduce a young man to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance for this evening as a memorial for the late Corey Russell, who was deeply involved in the program and will be sorely missed. Pete?
Do you want to just introduce who's going to lead, Mr. Burgess? Can you hear us okay? All right. Mr. Burgess, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Gordon. How are you?
Good. Would you mind introducing who's going to lead the pledge, and Mr. Milius would like to offer that individual the chance to lead while we do this.
Okay. Adam Cushman is our senior patrol leader. He's going to lead us.
Okay.
All right, terrific. All stand. Whenever you're ready.
Please stand in your name and stand up by the allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hold on, Tom. I could have swapped over though. Do you want to just do a moment of silence now? And
Yes. We're going to follow that up with a moment of silence, and then we will resume with the meeting. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for leading us.
can you guys hear Mr. Milius now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I guess we will move on with the approval of tonight's agenda. Is everyone satisfied? Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye, unanimous. Selectmen's meeting minutes. This is for regular session November 9th, November 10th, November 16th, November 19th, November 23rd, December 3rd, December 8th, December 10th, December 17th, December 22nd, January 7th, and the executive session meetings for December 8th as well. Has everyone had an opportunity? And if so, can I get a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to Mr. Garin.
I move to affirm and approve the following warrants and commitments. Payroll warrant number 69 for $373,342.58. Vendor warrant number 70, $59,739.12. Withholding warrant number 71 for $136,752.24. Ambulance commitment for $55,558.61.
Can I get a second?
I can second it. I'll accept warrant number 69, sub numbers 1687, 1688, 1691, and 1700.
Okay, voting on everything except 1687, 1688, 1691, and 1700. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. I will move number 1687, 1688, 1691, and 1670. Can I get a second?
Second.
Aye.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Abstain.
abstain? Mr. Andrews?
I move to approve the following warrant. Vendor warrant number 72 for $1,364,937.85.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to approve the payment of the following Selectmen bill. KP Law, BC, legal November and December,
I will second that.
for $4,460.04.
I will second it again. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those
I recuse.
passed. And the Selectmen's bills.
Insurance, MIA Property and Casualty Corporation, $2,100. Insurance, Chubbs and Son, Division of Federal Insurance Company, $3,489. And Selectmen's expense account, $270, WB Mason, and 47 cents. And that completes my presentation.
I'll second those.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. We have a few minutes until our first appointment, so we will go to general mail.
So on COVID, other than, we continue to have cases, though a little bit, the total for the last 14 days is a little bit less than it was a few days ago, but still very high. We're still at triple red. There's not really any local news. The state did lift some of the restrictions during the last few days. Tomorrow, residents who are 75 years and older can start registering for the vaccine via the state website. Unfortunately, we don't have, as in Halifax doesn't have the necessary deep freeze capabilities for the Pfizer vaccine, which is what's being distributed at this point for this round of the vaccination program. And we don't have the number of people eligible in order to qualify. The Pfizer packs come in 975 doses a pack. And we don't have that number at the 75 and over level. So the town's own clinic's going to need to wait until it can receive the Moderna vaccine. I know that Susan Lawless and her staff are working hard to get the word out to eligible residents in Halifax and working with them to navigate the process, since there will be vaccination sites elsewhere in southeastern Massachusetts, but for many people it's difficult to go through the registration process, and Susan and her staff there are working with seniors to work with, get them through that. So we're going to have a slow rollout here at the Lady of the Lake Church, only when we get the Moderna vaccine and that we're fully capable of being able to run that program. But I know the fire chief's working on that. What's that? So that's at legal. There's no news on Green Earth Cannabis. I haven't finished working on the HCA. We have the above ground storage tank hearing tonight at 6:45. 2 letters have been sent to the board from abutters and such in support of the application. And then you'll deal with any approvals and contingencies upon any decision that you make. On GATRA, I'm not ready to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about the vacant Halifax Silver Lake School Committee seat a little bit later tonight. On records retention and e-permitting, for funding, unless the town appropriates the money itself, my hope is to get funding from the state. The IT bond bill did include money specifically for Halifax for these purposes, but it's yet to make it to the actual capital improvement budget submitted by the governor. And then I've provided some information about estimates of costs for various segments of this. Caesar has provided you with a packet with some of that information also. He's going to continue to work with the vendors and the departments, and I believe we'll be submitting 1 or more articles for this type of work for the town meeting. And we can get back to that at future meetings if the board wants. We did receive a town bank form from Pamela Engstrom. And that's been passed out to the boards and committees. The board did receive a letter from the South Shore Children's Museum. If you remember, they held a drive-in over at Walmart back, I believe, at the end of October. On behalf of the South Shore Children's Museum family, we'd like to thank you for your assistance with our Hocus Pocus drive-in movie night on October 16th at Walmart. Without your help, the South Shore Children's Museum would not have had a final opportunity to engage with our network of families. After being forced to close due to COVID and financially devastated by the cancellation of our fundraisers, and not being able to open in July due to precautions, the museum may not have the opportunity to have one last engagement with our families. Having the opportunity to share one more event with our excited friends allowed the museum to send a message to our followers that we will be back as we reconfigure and make a plan for our future. We have about 40 families join us, and with terrific mild fall weather, we enjoyed an hour and a half of popcorn and laughs. We look forward to working with the town again in 2021. Let's see here. South Shore. On Ponce Pond projects. I've been in contact with Solitude about the various projects we're thinking about for this coming spring and summer. We have about $175,000 set aside for Ponce Pond. Unfortunately, that's not enough to do everything that the town might want to do. We need to do some basic study work at the beginning, revise the natural heritage habitat management plan. We have to file notices of intent for weed control. We need to do a plant survey for invasive weeds for Westmont Ponce, though we may be able to hold that off, but it's not really material given the size of the other items on here. Water quality and algae monitoring we'll need to be doing during May through October, and then a mussel monitoring program as part of the algae work, which all those first things really don't spend that much money. It's maybe $20,000 to $25,000. The big numbers are the application of aluminum sulfide in Westmont Ponce Pond, that would be $100,000. Application in Eastmont Ponce Pond would be $70,000 because Eastmont Ponce is simply less in volume. And then invasive weed control, we've got overpopulated in Eastmont Ponce Pond especially. That would cost $90,000. And I had talked to Dominic about this in the sort of sense of, if we're looking at May 10th, where we have our town meeting, or we assume we're having our town meeting. Of the larger projects, which one needs to get done first, in the sense of that if we waited on the others, they would still be effective, and one of them might be less effective waiting later. And that's the invasive weeds. If we hit it early in the spring, before May 10th, we can get a handle on the situation in Eastmont Ponce Pond. Doing that and doing most of the other study work would spend about $116,000, and we would still need $170,000, of which $59,000 we'd have available to us. So what I'm recommending is that we go ahead with those first elements with the aim to do the invasive weed eradication before May 10th and ask for sufficient money at the annual town meeting for the rest of the projects, which are basically the algae what do you call it? Alleviate the algae problem in West and East Montponset Pond. We can do that work. I talked to Dominic about, if I gave them the go-ahead on May 11th, let's assume the money was appropriate at the special town meeting on May 10th, and I gave the go-ahead, they would still be able to be up and running in the ponds sufficiently early in the, it'd be the later part of the spring, but early enough so that it would have an effect for the rest of the year. We don't have money to do everything right now, but my hope is that the town will make a decision that it does want to continue the algae work and also this year do the weed eradication work and do it in that order. And I obviously at some point the board wanted a conference with Dominic via Zoom or something like that, we could get that set up. But I had gone back and forth with him a few times during the last couple of weeks to get prices, the list of projects, the prices, and what sort of schedule we might be following. And that's my recommendation at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we have any update on where we stand with Broughton supporting the cost of?
No, as far I'm not assuming anything from Brockton right now. They're doing their own research work, which I don't think it may be done by the end of this year in terms of water, not weed, but water management, because they were just doing the diversion tests during this month. So I don't expect them to come up with a water management plan or any money to do any proactive work on the ponds this calendar year at the very earliest.
Have we ever looked into working with Plymouth County to see if their dredge was available to try to remove some of the material in the ponds?
I can find out. I know there's sometimes there's a problem. Well, let's find out. Because I know in terms of weed harvesting, one of the problems is that the weeds break up and then just move around the pond and replant themselves. But I can check about the dredging.
Just think we're going to continue to dump money into the ponds. We should look, even if it's a higher cost long-term issue, if we think something outside the box than what we've tried in the past.
Well, it's going to be an ongoing problem no matter what we do. So if we can find something that's a little more effective for a little longer, as long as it's cost effective, it's worth a look.
Sure.
Okay.
145.
We good? Yeah, we've got a hearing at 7:45 with Mr. Anthony Curtin.
Right, I have to recuse myself and go to the public side.
Okay, you can do that. Mr. Curtin is with us. We're just kind of following up with our first conversation, making sure that the steps are clearly delineated. I think what you're looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, is some indication for the board that if all things were being equal, if you were able to obtain your special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals and had a favorable decision of the Planning Board, if the Board of Selectmen would be inclined to support granting of the permit for the fuel storage facility. Did I essentially say that correctly?
That's good, yeah.
Okay.
The other portion being that also the necessary okays are gotten from the fire chief and the Massachusetts Fire Marshal.
Yeah, that sort of rolls into the Zoning Board of Appeals. So. We have had, and correct me, Charlie, if I'm wrong, at some point we have to have a public hearing of our own.
Which is this is it.
This is it, all right. We have had 2 letters in support. We haven't received anything in writing.
Other than the 2 letters of support.
Other than I was going to say, not supportive. Does anybody want to discuss this or talk about it? I see an audience.
Hi, Richard Greeley, Home Street in Halifax. What would exactly positive or negative results of the board if any decision was going to be made tonight? I was curious about that. What would, is this like a recommendation to the zoning board, planning board, et cetera, or, you know, what was actually going to be accomplished tonight with your decision?
I believe all we're looking to do, and Mr. Garin can chime in at any point, is to give Mr. Curtin an indication of whether this board would be supportive, assuming that all the other requirements have been met.
Because the board has to issue a separate license. The ZBA handles the special permit. The planning board handles site plan approval. The fire chief and state fire marshal handle fire code. Under the general statutes, the board of selectmen is actually the issuing authority for sort of the final okay. So it's not up to the board to make recommendations. For instance, they don't have a set of the engineering plans or anything like that. That's going to be going through the fire chief and the ZBA, for instance, the planning board. But they do, under the statute, have the approval authority.
What will the board take into consideration if there's going to be approval or disapproval, given what is said tonight?
Well, if the zoning board of appeals granted the special permit, met all the requirements necessary, fire department is the big one, because they have a lot of authority in this. It satisfies zoning requirements. They have a site plan that is approved by the planning board. And, you know, we listen to any opposition to this particular request. I believe the two letters that we have were actual abutters or within the 300 feet. I'm not sure. I don't believe you're in a butter. No. And those are the things I'd be looking for.
I would rather wait and see whether or not the other boards, in fact, they have authority over this in the beginning, whether that they okay the project or not, whether or not we support, because it's a mute factor if he doesn't get the ZBA or the zoning board of appeals to give him the bit.
I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If it can meet all the requirements, and I haven't seen any real opposition. The abutters would be the most immediately impacted. And
I'm sorry.
I said the abutters, in my opinion, would be the most immediately impacted, and I haven't seen any outcry from the abutters. But again, the meat and potatoes of this thing is going to happen at the Zoning Board of Appeals when everybody's notified for the hearing and all the questions, should there be questions, will come up at this.
It goes from here to the zoning board at this point? That's like the next step? Will they be...
And or the planning board, depending on how Mr. Curtin wants to proceed.
So, will there be a recommendation or a approval or disapproval issued from this board going forward?
I don't see us taking any action at this point. This is a hearing. We're just listening to arguments one way or the other. I don't plan on calling for a vote of approval. I think it's sort of an informal, would we be in support of kind of thing.
All right. Okay. My father's not here. He's in Florida. I'm not speaking on his behalf. Anyone who knows him knows he's not shy about speaking on his own behalf, so I'm not, But I will say this with respect to the history of Mr. Curtin and I have very similar enterprises, very similar. My father started his business in a residential area when it was like from nothing. The town and the residents then compelled them to purchase land in a commercial area to run that business. As the business grew, they said, all right, we have to, the logical next step is in a commercial area, which he did. The business grew from there, and he wanted to have a storage facility, and the business, the town residents citing noise and pump, environmental impact, things of that nature, that in order to have that facility, they compelled him to purchase land in an industrial area. He had to purchase land. So there was a considerable hoops that he had to jump through. And I just want to know if the board recognizes that it appears that they're going to say one guy can go one way down this path, and again, I'm not speaking for my father, that another business has to go down a very similar business, which going to do a similar thing, goes down to a different path.
With all due respect, only because I know a little bit about the history, the fuel storage facility that you're referring to went in after the rental units were constructed. Am I not correct in that?
I think because, and again, I don't know, I'm not speaking for my father, I was a sled dog while he was, telling me to go, but as I recall, part of the reason that those storage facilities, the working days, the garage days, went up before the storage, the fuel storage tanks went up, because it was just such an arduous process for him to get everything going. They said, all right, everything has to be, done this way in an industrial area. I don't know if that's happening here or not. That's why I want to make sure,
Well, I think we're comparing apples with oranges here, but
Okay.
the first question is whether the zoning is appropriate, and that would be a decision that the zoning enforcement officer would make.
Okay.
And I believe he has made that decision, that it is allowed by special permit in the business district. And he is in the business district. He's not in a residential district. So if that hurdle has been crossed, the next step is the special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Sitting on the Board of Selectmen, I'm only speaking for myself here, if there was no particular groundswell of opposition, and he met all the conditions of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and a successful application to the Planning Board for a site plan approval, I, sitting on the Board of Selectmen, would have difficulty in not approving a permit for the storage facility. I think that's what Mr. Curtin's looking for, is some indication of where the board would be sitting. I think it would be incredibly difficult to deny a permit if everything else was met and had the approvals necessary. And again, I'm not seeing a groundswell of opposition here, at least at this time. So that would be my position, and I'll let Mr. Guerin speak for himself here.
The difference between what happened, and I remember very plainly what happened there, it was your father was in a residential area, and it let this truck run certain hours to warm up, and it was causing a noise factor.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, this thing with the mask is very difficult.
I apologize.
No,
That's all right.
it's hard.
One, you get to meet certain requirements. You have to be in an industrial or commercial or business zone. Where your father was, if I remember right, was in residential.
Oh, initially, way back.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. There's no denying that. That's. But when he got to the point is, when he got to the commercial area, where he built his house and where the office is now, and then he said, all right, well, it's time to continue to grow, and a storage facility is what I want to do. They said, well, you're going to have to do that in an industrial area because of A, B, C, D, and all that. I'm wondering.
Well, not to cut you off here. Different locations, different concerns. There were wetlands issues in the site that I think you're alluding to, which is where the business is operating from now. And it is allowed in the industrial zone without the special permit. There is a difference there, so that I don't believe it required a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. I may be wrong on that, but I think my recollection was because it was in the industrial, storage was allowed. So that was one less hurdle that had to be met. Mr. Curtin's burden now is, because he is in the business district, that specifically requires a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. Again, I think we're comparing apples with oranges in a lot of this. I understand your concern, you know, whether there's been equity in this transaction. I see where you're going with it, but, you know, without specifics in front of us, I can only rely on my recollection, having some involvement in that at the time. And I don't recall a special permit being made necessary. I believe it was just the fire department approvals, and I think it was as of right in the industrial zone. And I'd have to go back to the book. It's been a long time since I've delved into that section of the book, but I believe that that's the case. But in any event, Mr. Curtin, again, his hurdle is to satisfy the requirements of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board, and if those things are met, and again, this is the public hearing, I haven't seen a groundswell of opposition. Now, that may change at the Zoning Board of Appeals when all the abutters are officially notified by certified mail, and, you know, but all things being equal, and again, I'm not speaking for Mr. Garin here, I don't see an issue at this point.
You could be
everything was met.
You could be assured that if he doesn't meet all the requirements, that the board will consider deeply whether or not to issue a special license for him or not. He has a lot of hurdles in front of him, and he's got to run those hurdles too, just like your father did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Tom, can I just, Gordon, on the screen here, there's a hand on your panel. I don't know if that's you or a different Gordon or what. So, sorry to take you out of,
I think that's my father.
oh, okay,
So he needs to unmute himself if you're gonna allow public.
we'll try and listen to him as well as we can.
Hello?
Gordon, hi.
You got your volume on, Charlie?
I'll put it, let's see.
Yeah, but hold on a sec.
Reverb.
This is off now, so.
Okay. Yeah. We'll try. Yeah, let's see, it's getting into. We're trying to get it set up, Gordon.
Okay, try it now.
Okay, Gordon, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Gordon.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Gordon, you said, can we hear you? And I said yes.
I lost my connection here. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear anything.
Okay, we can hear you.
He can't, you gotta turn your volume on, Charlie.
I want this to speed there, I can hear you. You can hear me? Yes. All right. Everybody else can hear?
Yes, Gordon.
Okay. I just had a couple of questions. Is there a plan in front of you now?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that available to be put to the screen?
No. It's a regular 2x3 size.
Okay. I don't know what happens, I keep losing the screen. Is this the only hearing that's going to be held?
No, with the selectmen, or do you mean with the other boards?
With the selectmen.
That's up to the board. I don't know if they're formally making a decision tonight, or they're going to table this until a future date once the other boards and committees have met.
That was the chair's intent.
No, so Tom said that it is likely that they will table this and then continue it at some point. They'll bring it off the table, and that's after, the ZBA's met, made a decision, planning board's met, made a decision, fire chief, fire marshal have gone through their steps, and then this would come back to them for a formal decision.
And at that point, would there be room for discussion?
The hearing continues, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I can't see the plan, I'd rather do my discussion at that point than, I guess,
Well, we'll have more than, we'll have,
think about it to the property too.
yeah, we'll have more than this plan. This is a very simplified, one-page plan. The technical specifications and such are not before the board right now. Those would go with the other permitting authorities and departments, and if and when it comes back, the board would have a full set of the technical specs. But they'd be the same technical specifications that the fire chief would be reviewing, the ZBA would be reviewing, and planning board would be reviewing.
Okay. I don't even see the meeting now, I don't know what's going on with the screen.
It's Charlie, it's because you don't have the camera.
That would be my hope that I would be in that discussion at a later date.
And he's gonna, if he's in a butter, he will get notified to the zoning board of appeals.
Well, I think he means this meeting.
No, I understand, but he's gonna have plenty of opportunities to.
Well, he wants to speak to the board when the board takes this
No, I
off the
understand.
table. Yeah. Okay, anything else?
No, that would be it, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I don't know how to take the hand down.
Well, I'll get it down. There we go.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I guess what I'm gonna do, unless you have an objection, Mr.
I would
Guerin?
move that we table this until such time that the other committees have had their opportunity to weigh in on it.
I would second that, and all those in favor?
Aye.
I refuse.
Yeah.
The reason, Pam, for the record is my dad's involved.
Okay, thank you.
So I think you got a sense of where we're going with this? Unless there's something changes
got it.
for me personally.
No, I got it.
Okay.
Planning board next.
All righty.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you
Be
coming in
safe out
again.
there.
Thank you.
I'll see you around here this week.
All righty, moving on.
Just, is it 7:10 yet? Is Paula in yet? I don't see her on the screen at all. Is she zooming in, Gordon?
She was going to be.
Well,
Good night.
Calling her.
Good night.
Good night, Rick.
Be safe, Rick.
Just a couple of things on the MBTA service cuts. I think the board might be aware that there's been enough news articles, but I guess informally, we got a formal note from the MBTA saying, hi, we're doing service cuts so that the trains aren't running past 9 o'clock now on the weekdays, and there's no weekend service in Kingston and Plimpton line.
I don't ride that line that much, but I thought they'd already done that months ago.
They already had done that. But I think they just wanted to make sure that a note was sent out to the cities and towns. Fieldstone Farms horse shows, there was a revised consent agreement that was filed in Superior Court by Scott Clausen's attorney. Also, the 2021 dates were sent to the board, and I've sent them out to the chiefs and the building inspector and to the Board of Health. 311, 313 Plymouth Street, there's been a site plan review before the planning board. There's been no decision made. They're going to continue that, I think, for a couple of months. And it's going to the ZBA for a series of variances and special permit. The updated plans submitted by the applicant, I believe, have been distributed, so you at least have that updated. There's no action specific for the board to take unless it wants to comment to either the ZBA or planning board at a later date. Finance committee vacancies, we have two now. William McAvoy, who had resigned already in the last couple of weeks, and then Melinda Tarsi gave her notice that she's moving out of town and will be resigning effective February 15th. We're also going to need to fill slots on the capital plan committee. We need a selectman's representative or designee, and we need one citizen at large, and I'll start publicizing those in the usual places. It might be a little bit difficult bringing people in, but we're now down to, I think, 5. So it gets more difficult just to get the work done and get a quorum.
especially finance committee.
Right, Paul is here?
Paul is here.
Okay.
All right, we have an appointment, and I believe Paula Hatch is now with us.
So technically, I guess I'll recuse myself as selectman, but if it's okay to
Yep.
just stay up here with you guys.
Yep, so you can be
You're
able
an
to
honored
be heard.
guest.
Thanks. Paula, can you hear us? All right, there we go. Sorry, I had you muted for a second.
All right, so we have a vacancy to fill, Paula?
We do. We had a long-standing member of our Silver Lake Regional School Committee, Ed Dugenet, resign effective the beginning of this month. He had served well over a decade, was a valued participant. As you well imagine, the school committees, all of the school committees in the three towns, particularly Silver Lake, have really had an overwhelming year, and the members have really been pushed to do more than ever, and really kind of get through some uncharted territory. So I will share with you that we do have a very new member from Clinton and a very new member from Kingston as well, because of additional people resigning, and it's just really important to have a full committee committed to working, very hard, giving a lot of heart, and a lot of energy, and a lot of time to the needs of the schools. So I'm looking forward to, Halifax determining another person that can come join us and take a place on Silver Lake.
Okay, yeah, understandable, and you're right, it's been a brutal year for everybody, and the school committee's right on the top of that. I guess what we need to do is reach out and see if we can find some willing volunteers for this. We can post it on all the appropriate sites.
We should also contact the folks who had originally applied for the elementary school position.
Yes, I was going to go to that. I think we had some folks who applied to the elementary school that might be good candidates for this position as well. So we will reach out to them and see if they still have some interest in serving. And anyone else that you folks think might be a good candidate, by all means, bring them forward.
I was going to ask that we open the window for 2 weeks for the talent bank, and then if we could schedule interviews after that point in time.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see what kind of response we get, and then we can kind of take it from there. So we will go out for 2 weeks and see what we can do. Does that help you?
So I think we're all set on this issue, as long as we have a 2-week posting, if that's fine.
Is that good, Paula?
I'm thrilled. I'm very happy.
Okay, terrific. All right, let's be hopeful that we can do something here, and we get some folks stepping forward, and I'm sure we will. How's that for something positive? All right. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Anytime. I'll see you folks again in a couple of weeks.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Thanks a bunch. Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Courtney, do you know if Steve was planning on being here?
I believe he was.
Okay, because I don't want to start up, so.
He's on. Steve, are you coming tonight, or are you participating from Zoom?
I'm at home. I'm on Zoom.
Okay, so he's at home following on Zoom. Unless the board feels otherwise, we could do this. This is the next appointment, even though it's at 7:30. If the board wants to move that up, and we can move the meeting along, because it's our last appointment of the night, other than going to executive session for a few minutes.
Yes.
I would make a motion to change the appointment time to 7:15.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
So
You're
Courtney,
on.
if you could reintroduce yourself for the board, but for our TV audience, and then we can go through the complete streets and what we're looking for at this step.
All right, and is there,
You can move
you
up
wanna come
front
to
here
the mic?
to a mic, yeah.
I can be your fan of white if you want.
I did forget my tripod. All right, well, good evening. I'm Courtney, thank you. I'm Courtney Beck with Green Steel Environmental environmental. I've been working with Steve Hayward from DPW and Charlie on the Complete Streets program. For the
Can you try to move that microphone closer to you or maybe speak into it?
Yeah, it might be easier for Sid.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Hello. All right, so I brought a presentation tonight because we've gone pretty far along through the process of getting the Complete Streets program started, and now we're ready to ask for public input from members of the community. So I usually just flip it. There's nothing very fancy.
Is it easier if I go up here so you guys see?
I don't know, can you zoom into it? Yeah, okay.
All right. So the Complete
Yeah.
Streets program, as a brief summary, is a grant through Mass DOT to promote complete streets in communities around the Commonwealth. Specifically, they're meant to prioritize streets that are made for bikers, walkers, and not necessarily just focused on cars. So a lot of these projects consist of adding sidewalks, extending sidewalk networks, adding bike paths and road diets and speed bumps to reduce speeds, and projects along those lines, as long as smaller ones like adding streetlights at intersections where they may be dark, and larger projects like reconfiguring intersections where there are lots of historical crashes and problems where people may be uncomfortable driving. So the Complete Streets funding program is split into 3 tiers. So on this board, I show the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Halifax is done with Tier 1. Steve and I attended a Complete Streets training program, and the Board of Selectmen yourselves have approved the Complete Streets policy and adopted that for the town. So now we're on Tier 2, which is developing a prioritization plan for the town, which is essentially a list of projects that the town is interested in pursuing. In order to get this project going, there's a lot of research involved, and Mass DOT approved a grant for $38,000 to help the town conduct these studies, which is what we're working on now. These include network gap analysis of the existing sidewalk network and where there are gaps in that, looking at historical data of crashes on streets and intersections around town, and compiling a list of the most dangerous ones. And then another big part is getting community input. So we are asking residents of the town, the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, for their ideas for projects to focus on. So if you want to, yeah. Thank you. So these are some examples of projects that are complete street example projects. There are some that can be focused on the traffic and safety portion of complete streets. That would be reconfiguring intersections that may be tough to drive around. There's focus on the pedestrian facilities around town, including the sidewalks, crosswalks, pedestrian walking signals, ways to make these streets safer for people to walk and run around town. And then bicycle facilities, making it easier and safer, more comfortable to bike around town, including adding a designated bike lane, adding some bicycle parking at frequently biked to locations. And so we can look at all the data we want, but ultimately we do need to know what people would actually like, where there's a need for some of this infrastructure. So if you want to turn it one more. We've developed a website, wikimapping.com, which is it's a Google Maps sort of website of the town of Halifax, where everyone can go log in and answer these questions about where they see problems with the bicycle infrastructure, where they see problems with the pedestrian infrastructure, and where they'd like to see improvements. So you can go to this website, which, one more page, please. Thank you. So this is what the website looks like when you get to it. It's wikimapping.com /Halifax.html. And when you first come to this website, there's a welcome screen that prompts you to enter an email address or your name, some way for us to identify you and reach out if we have further questions. And once you're logged on that top corner where there's a red circle, you should see the options to add a route or add a point. And this is where, if there's a route around town that you'd like to walk and you have an idea of how to make a section of the walking area better, you can draw out the line on the street and write your comment about, I wish there were sidewalks here. This area is hard to cross the street, a crosswalk would be useful. You can also add points for that if there is a specific intersection that's tough to cross the street. You can add that as a walking concern point. Same for the bicycles. If there's a stretch of road that you like to bike on, but it's uncomfortable, you feel people are going too quickly and you don't feel very safe going through that street, you can add either a route or a point to show that and write your suggestion for how you'd be more comfortable. So a few people have already gone in and added some comments since Charlie posted about this website. And if you go on and you see someone had already written or posted something that you agree with, you can click it and add your comment on top. It can be as simple as, I agree, or you can expand on what they said. And this way we'll have a lot of public data to look at and see where the biggest concerns are and what those are. So then this next page shows the specific website functions for anyone who's a little less familiar with how to go in onto this GIS sort of map. You'll get options if you hit add a route or add a point, and you can select from either any of the line options to draw a line, and you can select any of those point options to add that point onto the map. And it will show up and other people will be able to see that there's a comment and a message there, but they won't be able to see who wrote it. So if anyone's shy, that'll hopefully alleviate those concerns. And that way someone will be able to either add on or say that they agree with it. And in the comment section, you can say as much detail as you would like. If you're just uncomfortable with it, that's fine too. It doesn't need to be as detailed as some of the other comments that have already been on there. And if there are any follow-up questions, we'll be able to reach out to you with that email that you provided at the beginning. And I think that's it.
Ashley, we had a question about the number of projects. I mean, I know the idea is to come up with a list of 15. Is that the number, or can it be less, can it be more? I guess the sort of secondary question to that would be, okay, now we have a list of whatever, and whatever that number is. Is there a maximum number of projects that we can then do? But I guess the answer to that would be, depends on how much money we have, right. Whether it comes from state funds, simply because something's a complete streets project on a list doesn't mean you can't use other funding for it. It really says, here's our program, we're going to push for these projects in these areas. There are sources of funding from the actual grant program, Complete Streets, but there's nothing preventing the town then from undertaking other projects, whether it's with Complete Streets money or with other money.
Yes, exactly.
But is there, in terms of the list, I take it we're submitting a list to the state at some point? And does the list have to be 15, or can it be a different number?
It needs to be at least 15. Okay. So we can add as many projects as we'd like. The only caveat to that is that we do need to have, for the ones that we're applying for funding from the state, which they'll offer up to $400,000 in construction funding for these projects, which can be all on one project or split amongst a few smaller projects. In order to apply for that funding for that project, we do need to have a design mostly ready to go, so that once they approve it, we can.
And what the money that we're spending right now is not engineering for each of those particular projects on the list. What it is the planning process to put together those lists, gather the data, work with the Board of Selectmen, ultimately work with Steve Hayward, develop the application to go in and say, here are our 15 lists, 15 projects or more, and here's why they are, here are what we're thinking about doing. But it's not, for instance, Green Seal did the engineering work, not that we've done it, but for the sidewalk, for connecting the 2 Cranberry Drive loads. That's not what we're doing now. Each project then would still have to get funding, whether it's from the state or whether it's from other sources, for then engineering and then for construction.
Yes.
For the Complete Streets program, can we get funding for engineering? It doesn't sound like we can. It's only for construction.
Yes, so the grant funding, the technical assistance, what we're doing now for the Tier 2 is only for the planning process and doing these studies. They specifically say you can't use that for design, unfortunately, which we will be going into it with preliminary designs for the top projects, mostly just so that there's a better idea and a cost estimate.
Are we going to know what amount of funding we could possibly get before we start spending money on engineering?
Yes, so every time you submit to Complete Streets, there's the possibility to get $400,000 for...
That would be for a maximum?
Yes.
Okay, so that would more or less be put aside for us? Is that, can I
Yes.
assume that? So that if we were, I don't want to spend $50,000 in engineering and then find out that we're only going to get $40,000 if you follow my...
Definitely.
So, well, I guess to follow up what Tom's asking, we submit it. Then what happens? Let's say, do we pick a project or does the state pick a project?
So the state picks a project. The reason we're doing the prioritization plan is ranking the projects in order of how the town would like to have them done, with your first priority listed as number 1. And then the state will look at our reasoning behind it, including all of these studies. We give them a final report with the reasoning behind it, which is part of why the public input is so important. That's a big factor that they look into. But they may not pick that first one as an eligible Complete Streets project. The program is fairly strict in looking at which projects meet the Complete Streets goals the best. I'm fairly confident that the way we're going about this and the way that we'll have the prioritization plan does align with their mission, and we'll have a good shot at getting the first and second priorities, but that's not guaranteed. So
let's say the state says, okay, number 1 looks good to us, go with it. What happens then? Does the town say, okay, let's look for money for engineering, or does the town say, we're not, I know there's pushback from some people that we shouldn't be spending any money on engineering. I know it, obviously you got to spend money on engineering to actually do the project, but given they don't want to see town money spent on engineering where there's a lot of other needs such as repaving roads, which, mind you, we've got soup to nuts of what we need to do with road work in town. And so I'm not saying they're wrong, I'm just simply saying if you have a limited budget, you're going to pick and choose what you're going to do. If you're not willing to spend engineering money, you're not going to do construction for that project for obvious reasons, because no one's going to come in and do the project with you without a set of plans. So let's hypothetically say that the state says project number 1 looks good, and Steve says, I don't have money for engineering. Are there other sources of funding that we could go to besides Chapter 90? Because again, Steve's setting that aside for the most part for the Pine Street Bridge project. But are there other sources of money for engineering costs that we could try for that wouldn't be using town funds, which would then, if we could get the engineering work done, be able to go back to the state, as you said, with a set of plans and say, hey, state, we've got a set of engineering plans for project 1. Can we get the 400,000 still? And I guess part of that is, as Tom said, is the money, once we send it in and they say project 1, is the 400,000 set aside forever until we get engineering work done? Or is there a point where the state says, hey, you didn't do anything, we're going to give this to somebody else?
So you will need to have the engineering work done before they'll allocate the $400,000 for you. So it's not always a guaranteed proposal, but for some of these, including the adding lights or adding crosswalks, there's not much heavy lifting engineering, so those ones are fairly simple. There's not much to lose there. For some of the larger projects with the intersections and roadway reconstruction and adding sidewalks onto a narrow road, those are much heavier on the engineering part. So those ones might be seen as riskier from the town's perspective. I've seen in the past that most towns that do spend the money on the engineering and have the plans ready to go are more likely to get the funding. But I do need to say that that's not guaranteed. So one way to do it would be focus on some of the smaller, less engineering-heavy projects. There's less risk to the town to lose on the engineering side. And then if there is a project that comes out of this prioritization plan that looks like something that really should get done, or that really, something that the town really does want to get done eventually, I'd say that doing the engineering is sort of inevitable for that, in which case you could keep applying for this Complete Streets program every year with that same plan until it sticks.
So how secure is the money for this funding project? I mean, the whole funding project itself, how long is it, the duration for it?
They don't say how long it is for. They have the full funding for this fiscal year. They just posted the projects that they approved for the spring, or I'm sorry, for the fall of 2020. And they were giving out the full $400,000 to municipalities that were applying for it. There isn't data on any towns that applied and didn't get it, so I'm not positive what those numbers look like. I'm not sure exactly what those chances are. I can call.
I guess what my concern is that we go ahead and do a project because this is a refundable projects that we have to reimbursement. They have to do the project first and have a vendor on hand that's completed it before we get the money. What's to say that for some reason that the money doesn't run out in the funding, or the legislators decide they don't want to fund it anymore?
So we know that there will be funding. The deadline for this program, or for this application cycle, is April 1st, 2021, and we know that there is full funding for that one because we applied for it and have the correspondence going with the Complete Streets program. So they do have funding for this round. The question comes up for how many more years they'll be doing this program and how many more times we can apply different projects. And that's something I'm not sure about. I don't know if they're sure about that either. But there is funding for this fiscal year.
Is that for every town that applies on time?
Yes.
So regardless of how many towns, I mean, there isn't a well that's going to run dry. Let's say we have an April 1st deadline. As long as we get in before April 1st, the money will be there if we do the appropriate things?
Yes.
We're confident of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Going back to the engineering, can you think of any other pots of money available to us other than our own funds or Chapter 90, where we could go for engineering money? I mean, as you pointed out, some of them, as you said, weren't heavy lifting. For instance, putting in new crosswalks. And obviously there are gradations of how serious the engineering work is. But, and if the engineering is $2,000, it probably is not going to change whether or not we pave a certain section of road, as an example. But if we're looking for more money than that for engineering, are there other places to go that you know of, or are we going to have to rely on ourselves?
I think you'll need to rely on the town's money. I know that Mass DOT specifically does not like giving grant money for the design and engineering portion. They like paying for the planning and the construction, but traditionally they haven't offered much grant funding for the actual engineering portion.
So I guess the plan that's in place right now that you're working with Steve on is tier 1, now we're at tier 2 with public input. If we get our submission in by April 1st, we could get up to $400,000 for this fiscal year's program,
Yes,
and 400 is the max per year.
yes.
Typically, how many programs have you applied for where you've gotten the $400,000?
I'm only working with Steve on this program, so the other ones are all publicly available on the Complete Streets portal, so you can
Okay.
see other towns and what they've done. Some towns are going at it and doing their own studies and hiring the local transportation authorities to work with them on that. So I've seen the numbers of towns getting it, but I haven't worked personally with them.
Okay. So what is the dollar amount that we're forecasting to spend this year to try to meet a submission deadline?
I don't think we've gotten to that
Well,
yet,
we've
right?
got the grant of $38,000. It's a reimbursable grant, but it's a grant nevertheless. Just like the state doesn't like to give out money for engineering, the state during the last few years has gone to reimbursable grants. In fact, as an example, Chapter 90 is in essence a reimbursable grant.
Right.
The state says, for Halifax, you got $250,000 to spend. Oh, by the way, you need to spend it before you get it back from us. That's a reimbursable grant, no different than here, where we have a contract with Green Seal for the $38,000. They're working with Steve on all these aspects of the tier 2. It goes in, we pay them, we get all the proper paperwork to the state, they give us the $38,000 back. So that, it's a wash for us. We spend the money, we get the money. It would be no different than if we got the money and then spent the money. The result is the same. But after that, the idea is we would hope to have the $400,000 up there in Boston. Again, a reimbursable grant where we'd have a particular project. It might not be a $400,000 project, but we'd have a reimbursable grant where we could, once we got the project done, the construction work done, we'd be reimbursed for that. Now, I think do we have to spend the $400,000 or whatever it is on June 30th of 2021?
We just need to have a plan in place, a construction schedule that the state's okay with, which can range in how long that lasts from town to town. As long as there's a plan to spend it that's reasonable and feasible, then that's what they need to see.
Good.
So we'll have another update with you and Steve when we
Get some feedback.
What's the schedule look like for ending the feedback section and coming back with the list of 15?
So I'm hoping to have this online map open for the entire month of February. And ideally, we get a lot of interaction and comments on there. I have a whole section reserved on this report for public feedback and recommendations. What we're looking at now with the crash data and local access scores for walking and bicycling, we're basically compiling all of these potential areas into a spreadsheet and then ranking them based on how many crashes there are, if there are network gaps in the sidewalk that are short. We're giving credit to the short sidewalk fixes and a little less credit to very long sidewalk fixes, mostly just with that $400,000 budget in mind. And then intersections with more accidents with injuries are getting higher priority. And then we've gotten lists of projects from the planning board and from other department officials, and those will go on the list too. And once we do get this public feedback, the more sort of points for each section, that'll give those sections a boost on the list to sort of see where most people are talking about, where everyone's in agreement something needs to be done. And then once we do have a rough list together. We'll work that out and come back and talk to you guys. I'll be working with Charlie and Steve to see if they agree with the list, if there are any changes that need to be made, if there's something that we're missing that you guys need to have done. We're also looking at the pavement management plan for the town and seeing if there's any overlap on roads that need to be repaved, that while we're working on getting that repaved, we could also add in a bike lane at the same time and sort of hit two birds with one stone sort of deal. So all of these are going into this one report that hopefully once it's all done, we'll have a very nice list. But there are a lot of sort of caveats into how we're ranking them and what weighs more, and that's fluid and can take input from anyone who's interested in being a part of that.
Charlie, has Steve contacted Old Colony Planning Council? Because they've done some surveys of some of our streets in town.
Yes.
Yep.
Both Steve and Courtney have been in contact with OCPC and been getting data on traffic. And that's where you get the accident data, for instance, but along the general traffic data. So yes.
Okay.
Does anybody remember the Salt and Stall bike trail?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Steve's even brought it up. I don't know if Steve remembers it. I think it comes, part of it's on Franklin Street.
In Elm Street.
In Elm
Comes
Street?
down Elm, goes 106 and then down Cobble Street.
Down to the left.
Not that you would know it. They used to,
They're very tiny signs
Yeah.
that have a bicycle
They
on.
just put new signs up a couple, beginning of last summer, as a matter of fact, for that bike path,
Ah.
that bike lane.
I can't say that I've noticed them, but that's good. I mean, some of the streets are pretty narrow and they're not exactly marked off. It's more an indicator of where it is as opposed to any safety concerns, but
We have been seeing those bicycle signs.
Right. It's supposed to be a bicycle path, I believe, from Boston to the Cape. Not a path by itself, but the idea was to find places people could bicycle all the way down. Some of them are a little bit more difficult than others, like Elm Street, for instance, has, forget about a bike lane, there's not even a white line.
Yes.
I don't think there is anymore, no.
no.
So that's actually our existing roadway network. I forgot to touch on that study. We've been out here for the past month, coming to all the streets around town. I don't know if you've seen anyone walking around with a camera and a high visibility vest, but basically getting measurements of how wide the physical road is and comparing that to how wide the road right-of-way is, so that we'll know if there's room to play for adding a sidewalk or a bike lane, and all of these beautiful pictures that'll be part of the report.
I was just wondering if there might be any state money available for any of the designated bike routes kind of thing, but probably not, but it was just a thought.
How often do we have to update the report? Is it once a year? So if they take one project and we're down to 14, do we need to update a 15th and resubmit?
It's good for 5 years.
Okay.
So it's called a 5-year prioritization plan.
Okay.
That's the formal title of it.
Well, my first thought is, 400,000 seems like a lot of money, but when you start looking at prevailing wage and bids and everything, it really doesn't go all that far.
2/10 of a mile.
Yeah. So a lot of small projects is probably,
That sidewalk that they want to have us put in between the two Cranberry Drives,
yeah,
that's $132,000.
right.
Yep.
So
That's just for that one little piece of sidewalk.
that takes a good chunk of it right away. But, I think we can find enough projects, at least on a relatively small scale, if you will, to at least accomplish a few things that we don't have to come out of pocket for.
So you could be looking at $400,000 for the next 5 years with this plan?
You could do the $400,000 each time you apply for it. So you can't apply again if you still have an ongoing project. But if we apply and have the top 5 small projects, which all add up to $400,000 selected, once those are all done, we can apply again.
Okay. So it's possible we could apply for next year if all things fell in place. I can't see a downside at this point, although I'm always skeptical whenever it has anything to do with the Commonwealth, but,
It's just going to be the engineering cost
Right.
that's going to be an issue.
right.
That's what I say too. The engineering cost.
Well, let's
sometimes.
see how it shakes out.
So we just ask everybody to go to the website
Yep.
and fill in their comments.
And I know right after you posted about it online, there was a lot of people signed in, and I think there were 6 comments total made, so it might be a good idea to sort of refresh that maybe once a week during the process of having this online, just for as much visibility as possible and trying to spread the word.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions?
I just wanted, somebody keeps on asking something about how much it's gonna cost for the 15 plans, but we don't have a priority list yet, so we won't know what it's gonna cost for engineering yet.
Right.
But that sidewalk was $10,000 or $12,000 for that engineering for that.
Steve, did we do that last year? Or did we just estimate it?
From the CARES.
Yeah, the engineering work is done.
Yeah.
And,
For the Cranberry Drive sidewalk, the engineering
Yeah.
work's done.
We tried to get CARES money, but we didn't get it, correct?
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Shared road that one was.
So we could,
So we can use that plan. That's already all done, so that's one project that we don't have to pay for.
That's a wonderful thing.
well, if we get that submitted by April 1st, then that would,
Yeah. Well, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, keep up the good work, Steve.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right,
I hope you don't have too long a drive.
I only skidded twice and fishtailed once on my way in, so I think that's a win.
I guess that's good.
They were very slow motion, but
Well, be careful.
Yes.
thanks. All right, well, thank you for having me, and
Well, thank you for braving the elements in addition to everything else. All right, moving on. I believe that concludes our appointments. Did you still have a couple more things, Charlie, on your list?
I don't,
No, you got
I know.
the finance.
The only thing I needed to go into exec with the board about was the mixed unit negotiations, that's it.
All right, then I'm going to ask for a motion to go into executive session
So
as
moved.
discussing strategy with respect to litigation in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town. I had a motion. Do I have a
not
second?
litigation. Just collective bargaining, right?
But collective bargaining, yeah.
I'll second collective bargaining.
All those in favor, Mr. Garin?
Aye, yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Mr. Milius, yes. Unanimous. We are going to go into executive session to do as I described, and we will not be coming back into regular session to do any other business at the conclusion of the executive session. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.